inshallah. I know I had a pretty rough session last time with the ra and the concepts, explaining all the rules. We can probably, if you want, we can go back to page maybe 77, just go back one page, just to revise everything really quickly. So just like it's going to be open discussion, basically. Anybody's free to join in. So the question is, what are the rules of ra? Any volunteers would like to guess them? Because we covered 8 last week, from memory.
Just reading from the book, if the first rule is if the ra is مفتوحة or had فتحة on it, then it would be تفخيم or مفخم.
Yep, that's correct. So fatha, what's the other one? Anybody else would like to jump in on board and explain? So here we're talking about the rules of making the ra heavy.
Is it with a dhamma, it's heavy as well?
Yeah, perfect. So we have fatha and dhamma, that's 2 out of 8. What are the other ones?
So sukoon and before it is fatha, or sukoon and before it is dhamma.
Perfect, inshallah. So that's 4 out of 8. What else do we have? So number 6, we've got if the ra is got a sukoon, and the one before it is a sukoon, and the one before it is a dhamma, like khusr. That's point number 6. So here, quickly, let's recap. If it has a fatha and a dhamma, then it's heavy. If it has a sukoon and before it is fatha and a dhamma, then it's heavy. The situation that we have in number 6 is if it has a sukoon and before it is a sukoon and before it is a dhamma. That's another tafkhim. The last 2, which are the most complicated ones, we said, إذا كانت الراء ساكنة وقبلها كسرة عارضة ملفوظة أو مقدرة نحو, if before it is a sukoon that comes about from hamzat al-wasl. For example, if it's irji'u, الذي ارتضى. So basically, if it's a kasra, as a result, remember that keyword is as a result of the hamzat al-wasl, and you have to start on. So that's when it becomes heavy. And number 8, as we said, it's an exceptional case. The ra has a sukoon on it. Before it is a kasra. However, we said it is followed by a harf isti'la, or a letter that has a sifa of isti'la, which is like a sad or a ta or a qa. So because, as we said, because of the big disparity in pronunciation, you can't hit a light note and a light note and a heavy note at the same time. To make it easier to pronounce, to facilitate it, you are obliged to actually make the ra heavy, so it actually makes it easier to pronounce the next letter. So that's the exception. And the examples we said were irsada, qirtas, and firqa. Any questions about the 8 rules?
Yeah, I have one question. These are the only 3 elevated letters. I mean, what's the in easy? Can you explain the elevated? What are the elevated letters?
The elevated letters, they're all heavy, but they come from, you could say, the roof of the mouth. That's why they're elevated. So the letters are the family. They're in the family of khussa, ضغط, and qidh. So khussa, ضغط, and qidh, kha, sa, da, ghain, ta, qaf, and I'm trying to remember. So they just remember you in the Al Jazariya, they're remembered as Khussa, Batin, Tin. So if any of these letters, Ra Sakina comes before them, and they come immediately after the Ra, then you're obliged to make the Ra heavy as well in order to facilitate easy pronunciation. So I'm hoping that acronym made it a bit easier.
Yeah, Jazakallah. Now I remembered by that acronym. I forgot actually due to elevated. Okay.
No, perfect. No, Jazakallah khair. That's a good question. Any questions about the 8 points so far?
Just number 7 again, if it's possible.
Yes, 7. So 7 we said when it's sakina and it's preceded by incidental kasra. So here, basically number 7 is talking about Hamzat al-Wasl. So if you have to start on Hamzat al-Wasl, as we know, we'll explain the rules in detail. Sometimes you can say it with a dhamma, or sometimes, sometimes you say it with a kasra, sometimes you pronounce it otherwise, depending on where it is in the sentence. So if you start on Hamzat al-Wasl specifically, and it's a kasra, it's like irtada and irji'u, then in this case, you have to make it heavy. So it's irtada, irji'u. So it's basically, it's Hamzat al-Wasl, and you're starting in the broken form. So,
Jazakallah.
Ajmain. Any more questions on points 1 to 8 before we move on? Alhamdulillah, that's good. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. So we said here, أحكام الراء تفخيم الراء في 8 حالات. So we're making تفخيم, we're making it heavy in 8 cases, and we make it light in 4. And it is permissible to do both in 2 situations. So let's just skip the Arabic. Muhammad. Okay, we'll probably grab somebody to read page 78, inshallah.
I will read, inshallah.
The case of tarqiq for the ra.
Yeah, inshallah. Bismillah. Okay, the first case is the cases of tarqiq for the ra. Number 1, when the ra is with a kasra, as in karimun, rihun. Shall I read all?
Yeah, keep going, inshallah.
Okay, number 2. Case number 2. When the ra has a sukoon and is preceded by an original kasra and not followed by an elevated letter, means opposite of last case number 8, I think so. Fir'auna. Number 3. When the ra has a sukoon and is preceded by a non-elevated letter with a sukoon and that is preceded by a kasra, as in. Examples are Hijr, Qadir. Number 4. When the ra has a sukoon and is preceded by a soft ya, lean, as in Khair, La Dair.
Yeah. So this is a really important one to know. So here we call this in Arabic sometimes referred to as ya lean or ya madiyya, however you pronounce it. But basically, if a ya comes before a sukoon, so what do I mean? You got dair, khair. So if a ya comes, a ya naturally is broken. So as a result, the next one has to sound broken like the ya before it, if it has a sukoon on it. So that's something to remember. Carry on, bro.
Yeah. Permissibility of making ra heavy. Number 1. When the ra has a sukoon and is preceded by a kasra and followed by an elevated letter with a kasra, whether while continuing or stopping with a rom at the words of Allah the Almighty. Example is firkin kattaudi. But when stopping on it with a spoon, there is no other choice than making ra heavy due to the departure of the reason of tarkeek, which is the elevated letter with a kasra al-kaf.
Okay, for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to leave talking about Ram for a different session. But I just thought I'd ask everybody, does everybody know about what our brother means here with regards to pronouncing in two different ways? Any questions about this situation?
So the same example as number 8 in تفخيم الراء.
Yep. So here, you've got them, basically, you got a difference of opinion with some people. Because basically, you've already told us that the rule, if it has a kasra, you make it as kasra. And here it's really complex, because if you're reading, when you're stopping, it's one hukum. If it's continuing, it's a different hukum. So here, if you stop, for example, you go وكان كل فرقة. So here, when I'm stopping, it's easier to pronounce a stop and make it heavy. But sometimes you might hear people saying it with a kasra. They might make it light. They'll say وكان كل فرق كالطود. So say فرق كالطود. So here, we're relating to, when you're stopping with a sukoon, there is no choice in making it heavy. So here, if you're stopping on it, it has to be heavy because you're stopping on a heavy letter. But obviously, when you're carrying on, it's not as heavy because of, obviously, I'm reciting as I'm carrying on. So any questions? I know this is going to be a heavy one to understand because in the Jazariya it says, well, the difference is going to be the kasra at firq. And that is so does everybody understand about pronouncing it heavy when you stop the qaf and making it easy while you're carrying? $100%. So there's two rules on this word. So we're all good. Everybody gets it. There's two rules on this word. You say it differently when you start and you stop.
Sheikh, I still don't get the difference between this one and, because we had that rule number 8 and it was تفخيم الراء. It's the same word, فرق and فرقة.
Yes, here إذا كانت راء ساكنة وقبلها مكسور بعدها حرف استعلاء غير مكسور في كلمة نفسها. So here basically we're saying we're making it heavy because of the استعلاء.
So because the qaf has kasra in it, is that the difference?
Oh no, if we here I'll read it in English and then I'll explain. So when the ra has a sukoon and is preceded by a kasra and followed by an elevated letter with a kasra. Oh, sorry, I forget about wrong. Well, when you stop on a sukoon, stopping on it, there is no choice, but you have to make it heavy. So normally, yeah, I see what you mean. So basically, you're saying it's got a kasra on it. So that's why it should be lighter. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, kasra, that's the difference between this one and the one before. Firqa had a fatha on it.
Yes,
and
yeah, perfect. Yeah. So the other ones, in number 8, what brother's saying here basically is it's harf istila and has a fatha on it. Fatha, istila means to elevate. Fatha naturally elevates a letter, makes them more open. Here you've got a elevated letter, but it's in the broken form. So the kasra tends to drag it down. So as a result, you've got basically an elevated letter, but it's not on the hard fatha form, like rule number 8. So that's why we're saying there is a permissibility for making it heavy or light. So to make things easy, when you stop on the qaf, it becomes a sukoon. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as a result, when the letter has a sukoon, you don't look at the haraka because it's already a sukoon, because a sukoon means not to move. So you look at the sifa. So in the sifa here is isti'la, and because it's isti'la, because it's mufakham and it's heavy, then we tend to go, oh, okay, in that case, we'll make the right heavy. But if you're carrying on, however, it's not a sukoon anymore, it's a kasra. And when you look at firq bizat, specifically, you've got a kasra before and a kasra after. So that's why the ulama are saying, based on that rule, it has two cases, two rules for this word. If you're saying firq and you're stopping on it, then it has to be heavy because it's a qaf, and the rule is the qaf has a sukoon on it, but it's harf isti'la. So that's the justification. If you're carrying on, however, you're saying it as كان كله فرق كالطود العظيم. فرق. So you see when I'm saying it, it's broken. Then the ra is broken and the qaf is broken. So it's easier to break it and make it light when I'm continuing recitation. So some mads, for example, you find they're going to be long. Some mads, when you're carrying, they don't extend. This is called this waqf al-arid. There's a different rule. But basically, that's why it has two different rules. The way it's pronounced is differently when you stop compared to the one when you carry on. And firq is a really unique word. That's why it has two characteristics. That's why. Hopefully, I didn't overburden you with that one.
It's better, Jazakallah.
Yeah. So that's the thing to remember. When it's a qaf and you stop on it, you have to make it a sakin. And when you make it a sakin, then the only thing that's left other than the sukoon is a sifa. So you go with the sifa. But when you're not stopping on it, you're going with a haraka. So you just carry on. So it's obviously the haraka that we look at here is it is harf isti'la, but has a kasra on it. So firq is an exceptional situation. But as long as you remember the word, I think it should be okay. Just remember it's the exception to the rule. So any more questions on firq so far?
And Sheikh, on here, if we're going to keep going and not stop on the qaf, then we have the choice between heavy and light.
Well, if you're stopping on it, you have to make it heavy because of the qaf, because it makes it easier to say the qaf afterwards.
Yep.
If you're carrying on, everything is already in broken form. You might as well just carry on with the flow.
And okay, but you so if you do carry on, then you must make it light. If you say firqin, then it must be light.
Yeah, because when you look at it, based on the rules that we've mentioned so far, from 1 to 6, I think, it's sakin, but not only is the one before it a sukoon, the one after it's a sukoon. Sorry, not only the one before it is a kasra, the one after is a kasra as well. So it's easier just to carry with the flow.
Okay.
So it's how do I say this? Yeah, it's just carrying with the flow basically. Yeah. So what we have to understand is the word firq is an exception, because the words that we these ones, they follow the normal case, which is if it's harf isti'la and before it is a sukoon, then you make it heavy. However, you got a case where you got one that's got both. That's why people are confused. Hey man, I've got a harf isti'la afterwards and a kasra. What do I do? So we go, okay, we give two rules, but these are the conditions. If you're stopping, it has to be heavy. And if you're carrying on, it has to be light. So that's how you remember it, just for the word firq. And if you memorize the Jazariya, it actually mentions this word specifically. Basically. So that's why I tell people the exception, because when you're reading a poem, generally it tell you all the rules. But if the word specifically is mentioned by name, then you know that's an exception. So hopefully I've clarified that.
So that's the only example in the Quran that follows this. Is that right?
For Hafs, yeah, specifically in this situation, yeah, I can say that for Hafs. So it's obviously you got other recitations that recite differently, but I'm not going to confuse you with that one. So just remember that one. So what normally, however, the people that are proficient reciters and natives of Arabic, for that ayah specifically, what I've noticed, now we're stepping back now from the technicalities. We're looking at this shows you how important it is to understand the meaning of the Quran when reciting. Because what happens, normally people don't stop on firq because it's an incomplete. You're allowed to stop, but what I'm trying to say, we're saying كان كل فرق basically each I can't translate, my translation is pretty horrible. Basically here we're talking about so how great it is, and it's like how it's a firq. So because of the nature of the Arabic grammar, people continue. They'll say firqin كالطود العظيم because otherwise it'll be an incomplete sentence because it's giving a description of the type of firq. You see what I mean? So you can stop on it, but however, most people I see when they recite Quran, whether they're memorizing, listening to a YouTube video, or whether they've memorized it, they like to complete the sentence. So that's why sometimes you don't have to get into that level of technicality. So, but it's good to know that when you're getting asked for an exam, that's why. All good. I think I fried enough brains for today. No more questions on firq? Alhamdulillah, I think we're good. Okay, I'll grab somebody for the next one. Permissibility of making the right heavy or light. Anybody would like to jump in?
I can reach here. Permissibility of making the ra heavy or light. When the ra has a sukoon and is preceded by a letter of isti'la with a sukoon, which is preceded by a letter with a kasra, and this is while stopping with a sukoon on al-qitri misra. Imam Ibn al-Jazari preferred tafkhim in misra and tarqiq in qitri in accordance with the case when continuing. However, in the case of continuing, ar-ra should be heavy in misra because it has a fatha and light in qitri because it has a kasra.
All good. So I'll stop for a second. So I'll let that sink in for a bit. So basically, here is talking about the permissibility, and the key word that everyone needs to remember is the saying Imam Ibn al-Jazari preferred tafkhim. So here, basically, Imam al-Jazari, for those that weren't there a few weeks, the Imam that compiled the narration, and his opinion is he's basically the alim of the art. So here, normally in Arabic, we'll say Imam so-and-so, and he has wajh muqaddam, for example. He has a preference to say something. And this can happen. You can have an Imam say one word in more than two ways. And that's valid because it doesn't technically change the meaning. And they'll probably have one way preferred over the other based on their own ijtihad. Reason being, not just a chain of narration, but because it complies with the rules of Arabic and it makes it easier to pronounce. Now, mashallah, as you can see, Imam al-Jazari, he's not completely new. Extended on existing Imams. So he focuses a lot of his work on ease of pronunciation. So what does it say here? Basically, now you got exceptional cases where tafkhim or tarqiq are allowed. These, just remember, these are the words now. We've covered the words that are compulsory. We have to make it heavy. We've covered the words that are light. we've covered the exceptions to the rule, where you make them heavy or light, depending on how you stop on them. This case, you're allowed to have both. Just remember that. So if you're ever sitting in an exam and you hear a heavy or a light one, you have to pass it. And these are the words that forward. We got مصر and القطر. So here it says واختار الإمام الجزري التفخيم في مصر. So here, Imam al-Jazari has specifically chosen to make مصر heavy and to make al-qitri light in the case of a wasl. So what does that mean? If you're carrying on pronunciation, أليس لي ملك مصر وهذه الأنهار تجري من تحتي. So basically what it's trying to say is that the Sheikh is trying to say, you got حرف استعلاء. استعلاء we said next to ra heavy. Here, these are exceptional circumstances. The Imam, and it's sufficient if you just memorize them. Misra is heavy. Qitri is light. The question is, why is that? And you'll basically say you've got harf isti'la and a fatha on the ra, and the other one is harf isti'la, but you got a kasra. So like firqin kattawdi. As we said, if you carry on with firqin kattawdi, because of the kasra and the qaf and the sukun on the ra, because you're carrying on, you have to make it light. Same thing here. You got a ta, but you got a ra maksura at the end of it. So here, regard these as the exception. Imam al-Jazari, and I repeat, Imam al-Jazari said it's his preference that Misra is heavy and the ra in al-Qitri is light. However, for whatever reason, if you pronounce them, if you say them the other way, these words are valid based on his ijtihad, because they're allowed to be pronounced both ways.
It will be a bit hard to pronounce the ra in Misra as a muraqqaqa.
Yes, I know what you mean. Subhanallah, because it's like أليس لي ملك مصر. You know, it's like it's when if you're carrying on, it's heavy. It's hard to make it light. Yes, I agree.
You have to put a lot of effort to make it.
Yeah, so mashallah, you can see Imam al-Jazari uses a lot of common sense as well, because he's not just looking at it from Tajweed, from an Isnad perspective. It's also about the language of the Arabs. What's easy for native Arabs to pronounce. And mashallah, what you said is perfectly fine, mashallah. Yeah. Alhamdulillah. Any more questions on these words? Because basically now we're just covering the exceptions on the rule. As long, forget about everything I said. If you remember the 8 bullet points, and you remember 3 key words, firqin, misra, and al-qitr. These 3 are exceptional and they have exceptional rules. If you remember the rules for these 3 and they have the exception, you should be okay. That's all I've got to say. So that's basically all the ra's lined up. Any questions about the ahkam al-ra' before we move on to the next sessions? Because that's basically everything we've covered about the ra'. We've covered the 8 rules on firq, because it has a rule when you stop and a rule when you start. And we covered the 2 words that have 2 different rules, but one is preferred over the other. All good? No questions? All good. So in this case, I'll probably grab, I'm guessing, Brother Musa. I'll probably get you to carry on with the adhesion and opening in Fatah al-Itlaq.
Okay, Bismillah. So the shape of the tongue when pronouncing the heavy and light ra. Is that what we're looking at, Sheikh?
Actually, yeah, carry on from that.
Oh, okay, yes, sorry. The heavy ra is accompanied by a curvature in the middle of the tongue and a narrowing in the throat, contrary to the light one. Adhesion and opening. The Arabic letters according to the confinement of sound between the tongue and the palate. So one has adhesion. When pronouncing them, sound is confined between the tongue and the upper palate, and they are sad, dad, ta, and tha. Has openness. When pronouncing them, sound is not confined between the tongue and the upper palate, and they are the rest of the alphabetical letters. So the closed letter, regarding the confinement of sound, at the closed letter, sound is confined between the tongue and the upper palate. And the open letter, regarding the confinement of sound, sound is not confined between the tongue and the upper palate for an opened letter. And the comparison between the closed and the open. A letter with istifal wa infitah, and it shows the different letters. A letter with infitah and isti'la, and a letter with isti'la and itbaq. A rule. The seven isti'la letters are two parts with elevation and adhesion. They are four letters: the sad, the dad, the ta, and the dha. With elevation and openness, musta'liya, munfatah, they are three letters: ghain, kha, and qaf. So the elevated letter with itbaq has more tafkhim than the opened elevated letter, as in huruf al-isti'la. Sorry, I'm using the app today. Al-damir, more tafkhim than ghalib. Wat-turi has more tafkhim than waqumi. وكذلك الضيغاء and عظيم. Should I continue with the characteristics with no opposite, Sheikh?
Yeah, just I thought I'd ask any questions so far about this section. So just to recap really quickly, what Musa has been basically saying here is you got different levels for حرف استعلاء المطلق أشد تفخيما من حرف استعلاء المنفتح. So basically, استعلاء has more than one characteristic. It can be open, it can be closed, it can be heavy, it can be light, and then can have استعلاء. So basically, the more sifat of, let's just say, heaviness, like a letter has, the more layers it has, the heavier it is. And here, the example we have is damir, is more tafkhim than ghalib. Ba is heavier because it's got, obviously, it's a harf isti'la, it's an elevated letter that has an itbaq as well. So the combination of isti'la and itbaq make it heavier than an open letter like ghalib. And same thing, waturi, waqumu. So just that's basically that section. Just remember that. Just because something is heavy doesn't mean it's just heavy and light. Now we're looking at different layers of heaviness. So just remember that. This is going to come in handy later on when we cover, let's just say, tafkhim in detail. But just remember that. It's like if somebody asks you, why is this letter heavier than this? Then you can say, oh, this is the fact. Any questions before we move on to the next section? Perfect. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Qalqala.
Characteristics with no opposites. One is whistling, a safir. It is a sharpness in the sound of the letter, produced from it passing through a tight passage. Its letters are three: za, and sin, and sad. Number two, al-qalqala. Linguistically, it is a disturbed movement. Arabs say the pot shook on the fire, i.e. it vibrated and was disturbed. Applied definition of it. It is emitting the letter of qalqala when it is sakin, by parting two components of the articulating parts, not accompanied by any hint of a harakah. out of the 3 harakat. Its letters are 5, collected in the words Qutbu Jad. The difference between the muqalqal, sakin, and mutaharrik letters. So here we have a table, the letter with a sukoon, and how it is emitted by collision, and then how its emission with nothing. The letter with qalqala by parting, and then nothing, and the letter of a haraka, and by parting, and the haraka. So a comparison between the muqalqal, the sakin, and the mutaharrik letters. Yeah.
Just that timetable. If you can please just explain that, please.
Awesome. So which section would you like us to explain?
That timetable, the difference between sakin and muqalqal and mutaharrik.
Okay, that's a good point. So here, let's try to simplify it, make things a bit better. Oh, I see why. Okay. A comparison between sakin, mutaharrik, muqalqal. So here, anybody here, this is the first time you're hearing it. Anybody hearing about the word qalqala for the first time? Everybody knows the word qalqala?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So basically what I'm trying to say here is that I'm not going to try to get into the detail of different levels, but I'll probably ask the students, with the exception of the ones that are already doing the weekend classes, how many levels of qalqala are there? Like, what does qalqala mean to you? Can somebody give me an example?
Like an echo. And is there 3 levels?
Yes, there's 3 levels. So here, basically, the rule to have qalqala is that it has to be from qutb jad. It has to have. So here, when there is a, I'm not going to teach this because it's going to be a bit complicated. There is a difference of opinion. People sometimes say there's a 4th level. The 4th level is when basically harf qalqala has a haraka on it. I just don't want to confuse people, because there is a difference of opinion between ulama, just to be completely transparent. But I tend to tell people, look, it has to have a sukoon on it, and it, depending where it is in the sentence, denotes a different level. What I'll do to make sense of the table, I'll just answer your question in a sec, bro. I'll just probably get Brother Musa to read about the levels of qalqala, and hopefully they'll clarify it. So if you can at least read that page on different levels of qalqala. Brother Musa?
Sure. So it says here levels of qalqala. Qalqala has 2 levels. The greater qalqala, when stopping on the letter with qalqala, as in al-falaq, al-muhit, al-kasab, ila al-akhir, etc. And then the lesser qalqala, if the letter of qalqala is in the middle of a word or words, as in yaqdi, yut'im, yubasirun, etc. Levels of qalqala. When the letter of qalqala is merged into a letter identical to it or similar, it should not have qalqala, because idgham, the merging of those two, would be broken if it is made to have qalqala. As in haqqat, attala'a, rabbana, shajjajan, etc. So when stopping on a letter of qalqala with a shadda, as in haqqa, watab, al-hajj, the qalqala is for the second of the doubled letter, because the first is merged and is admitted by collision between the 2 components of the articulating parts. Accordingly, there will be no effect of stress on the clarity of the qalqala of the stress letter. So the qalqala in al-hajj is the same as in ya bahij. Mistakes that occur when performing qalqala. Mixing its sound with one of the three harakat, as in laqad kana tubatum Ibrahim.
Just a sec, bro. Just stop you here to make things a bit easier. So here, you'll hear this. The Sheikh is basically talking about there's a greater qalqala and a smaller qalqala. Great if you're stopping on it, because what you're trying to do at the end of it, if any of the Qutb Jad Sukun letters, these are Qutb Jads from Huruf al-Shidda, the letters of strength. So if you're trying to stop at a really strong letter, that's like applying a hard brake when you see a stop sign. Similarly, in Tajweed, having a strong letter of qalqala, slamming on your brakes is equivalent to slamming out, like stopping the air completely because of the sukoon. So what we tend to do, rather than go falaq, and you're choking on it, we say falaqo, and you let the air carry out normally. So what the Sheikh is saying, if the qalqala is in the middle of the word, then it's simple. It's less qalqala. If it's the end of the word, it's stronger because you have to stop the air a lot harder, because obviously the air is continuing in the middle of the sentence. There is an opinion that some people are saying, look, you could have a letter of qalqala in the middle of the word that doesn't just have a sukoon, could have be a mutaharrik, fatha, dhamma, kasra. And if it happens to be in the middle of the word, then in this case we make it a third layer. I don't try to preach that opinion, although one of my sheikhs has that opinion, because it can be extremely confusing. Well, I tend to tell people at the end of the day to simplify the rules. The time there's 3 rules. Qutb Jad has to have a sukoon on it for qalqala to happen. If it's in the middle of the word, it's the least qalqala. If it's at the end of the word, then at the end of the day we call it the middle qalqala. Here, if it's at the end of the word, like al-haqqa, then it's the greatest qalqala. That's qalqala kubra. What Sheikh Ayman Swed specifically says is, he says, look, here he gets really technical. He says the shadda is 2 qafs. So we're applying the qalqala on one of them, and that's why he sees it the same level as the greater qalqala. I know this is confusing for some of you. I have to admit, it can be, if you can at least walk away knowing that, look, at least the qalqala in the middle of the word is lesser than the qalqala at the end of the word, I'm happy to take that as opinion. If the one I tend to teach people is I tell them, look, if it's in the middle of the word and it's a sukoon, small. End of the word, medium. End of the word with a shadda, large. Because, to get a strong qalqala, our ijtihad is that you need to let out a strong letter anyway. So it doesn't matter whether shadda or not, it's a strong letter anyway. So you have to say al-haqq. At the end of the day, what we have in common with the Sheikh calls it a greater qalqala, or we call it level 3 qalqala, this is all pronounced the same. So this, for the sake of clarification, I had to mention this. The table can be a bit confusing. My approach, I try to simplify as much as I can. So I hope this answers your question, bro, with regards to the table, if it has a sukoon, if it doesn't. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so as you said, just for the sake of keeping it simple,
yeah,
for my little brain, it's just if it's in the middle, it's a small qalqala.
Yes.
And if it's at the end, whether it's mushaddada or not, it's a big qalqala. Is that fair?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and if it's at the end and it doesn't have a shadda, I'll just say medium. So it's because I do agree with Sheikh Ayman Swed, a qaf, like haqqa, shadda is basically two qafs put together. I do understand that, but to avoid the complication of the students, I tell them, look, make it the strongest qalqala that you have, and that makes them really pronounce it really strong. Because at the end of the day, it's like your brain wouldn't think in 1, 2, 3. Like, yes, we will categorize it like that, but at the end of the day, it's how you pronounce it that was what matters. So it's yeah, I'm not gonna dwell on too many people's brains, but I'm just letting you know there are people that are saying it's 2 levels. Sometimes people might say there are 4 levels. But if you hear about a qalqala that is the huruf qalqala that don't have a sukoon on it, then you know what the opinion is. You know, because it means this guy's getting really technical. I tend to have it quite simple. I just say, look, if it has a sukoon, that's it. Just let the air bounce. So I hope that's wrapped up qalqala really nicely. So qalqala is pretty straightforward. It's a simple thing. You just say وَكَانَ عَبَدًا مِنْ عِبَادٍ. You just say عَبَدًا. You say عَبْدًا. Because Arabs, it's hard for them to do that because it breaks up the word. Or for example, like you got يَقْضِي. You don't say يَقْضِي because it breaks up the word. So the Arabs, they always just say يَقْضِي, يُطَعِمْ, يُبَصِرُونَ. So depending where it is in the sentence, because of the S cutting out the S circulation, one might sound stronger than the other. That's basically it. Any questions on levels of qalqala? Page 87. So how there's characteristics that have opposites, like we have in fitah, and we have obviously its openness, and we have the closed off ones as its opposite. Here now we're covering the ones that have no opposite, like Safiya, whistling. You don't have anti-whistling. Qalqala doesn't have an opposite. It's just an inherent characteristic that is unique to one letter. So that's what the Sheikh is going through at the moment. So the qalqala and whatnot. Anything else, bro Musa? Page 87. Any questions?
No, Jazakallah khair, and I'll avoid any questions just to keep it simple, I think, for now.
All good. Inshallah, we'll keep going now. He's talking about mistakes that occur when performing qalqala.
Yes, mistakes that occur when performing the qalqala. Number 1, mixing its sound with one of the 3 harakat, as in لَقَدْ كَانَ تُبْتُمْ Ibrahim. And number 2, ending its sound with a hamza, as in ahad or samad. And stretching its sound and prolonging it excessively, as in ahad or samad. Cutting off the sound of the qalqala letter from the sound of the following one, as in yaqdi, yubasirun, yadkhulun. Characteristics with no opposites. So 3, the ease or the lean, a lane, it is a characteristic. It's ascribed to the waw and the ya, sakina preceded by a fatha because of the easy flow through the articulation point, as in khawfin, qawmu, al-bayti, wal qurayshin. And 4 is the drifting. It is drifting of the sound of the letter due to its incomplete flow caused by the tongue blocking its path. Its 2 letters are lam and ra.
So we talked about mistakes in qalqala. Lean is basically softness. So that's one characteristic with the opposite. Another one we said in haraf, which is drifting. So as we said, you have ra, min Allah. Now the lam, the tongue has to move in order for you to execute the lam. That's what haraf means. And we covered the mistakes in qalqala. Any questions so far about examples of how qalqala could be said incorrectly, just before we move on? To wrap up qalqala altogether. From points 1 to 4.
My question is like number 2, like ending its sound with a hamza, like it's Surah Ikhlas.
Oh, yeah.
So there is no qalqala actually in this, like Qul huwallahu ahad.
There is qalqala, but some people they'll swap, they'll cut the air too early. So what happens, like for example, comes from the back of the throat. It's done by me making tahqiq of the hamza. And that's basically, I'm intentionally closing the vocal cords to get it's that air that comes out. What happens if I cut it too early? I'll give you an example. I'll say ahad, samad. Here I'm letting it drag out. I'm letting the echo carry on. Because you know when you do an echo in a big building, sometimes you might hear your voice twice or three times, it's bouncing back. So that's how echo works. But if you do it too early, it's like slamming the brakes really hard and crashing. You don't want to say ahad, samad. You see what I mean? Ahad, samad. It's supposed to be ahad. You see what I mean?
Yeah, like it should be like a complete stop. I mean, sort of.
Yeah, it's a complete stop, but you let out the air like ahad, samad. You don't say ahad, samad, like an abrupt stop. There's a difference between, you could say, and then slamming the brakes to the point you're flying out of the car. You see what I mean? Because if you if you cut out the air in the middle of pronouncing the qalqala, it can sound like a You see what I mean?
Yeah, and how it is different from number 4, like yaqdi. So we shouldn't pass immediately, like we should stop.
Oh yeah. So number 4 is when you cut the air altogether. So there's a difference between, it's like seeing the stops, between seeing the stop sign after. So it's, if you see the stop sign after and you slam brake the window. But if you slam the brakes too early, you haven't even reached your destination, which is the line at the intersection. You know what I mean? So here, you get people sometimes they'll actually cut out. They want to make it bounce. They'll cut the air before they do it. So say yaqdi, yubsirun, yudkhilun, rather than saying yudakhilun. Yudakhalun, to the point that they actually we call it inhibas, or they trap the air. You see what I mean? So you can't trap the air afterwards and slam on the brakes really hard, like ahad. And you can't slam the brakes like, just like saying a stop sign. You press the brakes, but you press them gently, and you the car and you coast it all the way to the line. So does that make sense in a way?
Yeah, just the last question. Is there any general guideline like for calcula, especially for this one, like falak? So like few seconds, like microsecond, what's the duration? Then we immediately start the next verse.
That's actually a good
or the
point.
word. Like
me,
we
when
have
I'm reciting,
we have 3-second rule like in traffic. So maybe here's something similar, like okay, just 1 second or less, just for practicing purpose though.
you mean between surahs?
Like Kul A'udhu bi Rabbil Falaq means the next one. So how much time we should wait and then start next, or the next word or next verse?
I just do enough to basically gain a natural breath, because every time when I personally recite, I like to take a breath of air before I pronounce the next ayah. So I'll be like, let's pause. Qul huwa Allahu ahad, Allahu samad. So you can see I actually inhaled and exhaled, but I did this in between the ayah. So it gives me enough time to let out the ahad, but at the same time I need air for the next one. So think of it as a pit stop. At the end of the day, it's like filling up your car with gas. That's what you're doing with breathing the air. So you have to actually, there is no guideline. As long as you take a breath of air, that'll be good. But what I advise people, don't do a sakta. Don't be like, Qul huwa Allahu ahad, Allahu samad. It's if you're reading fast is different. But I tell people at the end of the day, give it the space it needs. Because what happens, if you're reading really fast, you'll notice that you tend to cram ayat together. And then as a result, you can lose a bit of the ahkam. So it's just be careful. So there is no general rule. Just make sure you got enough air for the next one. I know this doesn't make sense when we're looking at Qul huwa Allahu ahad, but when you start reading Surah Al-Ma'idah, where the ayah is half a page long, this is definitely gonna makes sense. I'm sure a few of you guys already are laughing right now on the Zoom chat when I said that.
Okay, Jazakallah khair.
No, it's mine. Appreciate it. All good. Any more questions about qalqala or mistakes happen in qalqala or other sifat? I think we should be all right. All good. Is there anybody else that you'd like to carry on with page 89? Drifting of the lam and drifting of the ra. Any volunteers? Man, I think I burnt everybody out early today.
Ustad, I can read.
Yeah, go for it, bro. Bismillah.
Bismillah. Drifting of the lam. The drifting of the sound of a lam occurs on both sides of the tip of the tongue as a result of the tip's obstruction of the path of a lam. Okay, drifting of a ra. As for a ra, the opposite happens. Its sound drifts from the sides of the tip of the tongue towards its middle. Like the example is al and ar-ra. Like okay, so I can read like how we can read ra and lam, al and ar. Like there's a drifting. You want to explain or should I continue?
No, alhamdulillah.
So your voice is cutting off.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear now.
Oh, yeah. Carry on, bro. It's all good.
Okay. Comparison between the drifting of a lam and that of a ra. Okay, we have only pictures, so okay, I'll continue. Next, characteristics with no opposites. Number 5, repetition at takrir. It is a light trailing of the tongue when pronouncing the ra due to its tight articulation point. The reciter should be careful not to exaggerate the repetition leading to the occurrence of more than one ra. Number 6, speeding. Tafashi. It is the spreading of the sound of a sheen starting from its articulation point until the sound collides with the inner palate of the top and lower teeth. Like sheen, sheen, a raw. Next is the characteristics with no opposites. Lengthening, istitla. It is the slight pushing of the tongue forward when pronouncing the bod from the back to the front of the mouth until the tip of the tongue lightly touches the root area of the upper two incisors, which is the effect of the air pressing behind the tongue. So should I continue or should I pause here?
Yeah, continue, bro.
Okay. Next is characteristics with no opposites. Number 8, nasalization, gunna as a characteristics. It is the characteristics of noon and meme, whether they have a haraka or sukun, whether pronounced clearly, merged or concealed. However, its lengths differ in accordance with their positions, which will be discussed in topics of the duration of Honna, page number 152. So next we have a table. Should we go through from the table, or I think it's
So
a long
any
table.
questions? Yeah, it's a bit of a long one. Just before we get too carried away with the table, any questions so far? But mashallah, we've covered now where we mentioned them. And now today, we've covered sifat without opposites. We said the letters of Safir, the whistling. We talked about al-lin, al-inhiraf, al-takrir, repetition, divergence. And here, basically, this is the characteristics of the letters distributed by the letters of the alphabet. So, mashallah, you can see on the blue one, there's characteristics with opposites, and the red one's characteristics without opposites. This table has basically every single characteristic of every letter of the Arabic alphabet, everything it has. So at the end of the day, like I said, I'm not here to get you to memorize the rules. This is not my job. The entire table has everything. For example, if you want to find out what Jim is majhura. It has to be said apparent, in the open. It's shadida. It's from huruf al-shidda. Ajid qatim bakat. That's how we know. Because if you memorize Jazariya, you'll know it's a strong letter. It's mustafida. Opened. It's munfatiha. It has to be opened. And it's one of the khalqala. And then, you can basically go through this and you understand all these things. Like you got seen. Seen is hams. It's whispered. Rikhwa. It's light or soft. It's lowered and it's opened, of course, and it's a whistling letter. So it's got every single sifa that you need for this. This is really critical if you're going to be an advanced Quran teacher or at an ijaza level, because you will get sometimes quizzed about this, and you will need to understand these sifat to explain to your student. For example, if somebody is like saying dua or da, or what are dalin, as we hear sometimes, then if you understand the sifat characteristics of Allah, like this table is here, then you'll be able to be correct. The student needs to make it more heavy. Or for example, he's missing more isti'la or itbat. And if I can troubleshoot these specific characteristics, then I'll be able to help my student achieve the maximum potential. So mashallah, you understand now the terminologies relating to makharij and sifat, articulation and the points, what makes them different in terms of characteristics, and this how mashallah to the level of how it relates to the human anatomy. So this is a really, I sound like I'm really making it really heavy for you, but on an ijaza level, if you're getting a certified ijaza for one recitation, this is the entry and examination, or let's just say first year. Mashallah, it makes you appreciate the level of like how important sifat and characteristics and letters are. If you can master that, you master Tajweed. Qalqala, ghunna, idgham, these things will come naturally to you. We're going to discuss these later. Mashallah, we're on page 92 already of the book, and we're still covering aspects. It just shows you, mashallah, how big and important this page is, or the topic is. I hope, inshallah, we've delivered it. So this is basically a summary of everything for the past 90 pages. 90 pages. Summarize it. Before we carry on, inshallah, any questions so far about sifat, the characteristics of letters? I'd like to get everything carried out before we start with practical.
Sheikhna, just might be a silly question, but why are they broken into the ones with opposites and not opposites? Is it, yeah?
No, it's like some characteristics. This is biomechanics. So like the opposite is like, the opposite of, it's like.
Your voice is breaking away.
Sorry, I'll try to find a better place. Muhammad, is that better? How about now?
Yeah, I can hear you now, Sheikh. Yep, I can hear you. Anyone else?
Yeah, everyone's all right. You can hear me?
Still it's breaking, but much better.
Inshallah. Let me just move around if I can. Bismillah. I'm not trying not to go outside because the sheep will see me and they'll start screaming. So, like I am, I guess it's going to be the Tajweed Tajweed Quran Club, the job of editing it out. Basically, where were we? Apart from talking about sheep. Muhammad. Yes, so this is just purely based on the biomechanics of
There's an anatomy of the throat and the mouth. So some things, they're open. Sometimes you can say things with an open mouth. Sometimes you can say it with a closed mouth. Sometimes you can say it soft. Sometimes you can say it light. Sometimes it's in between. And some things that are uniquely specific to a specific letter. So that's why we have like, when it says letters with no opposites, it means this is unique to a specific family. You know, like the whistling letters. Like, you know, there's something that Arabs, they called it, you know, huruf al-safir, or the whistling. It was comparing it to the whistling of a bird. I know it sounds crazy. You're like, how does it sound like sound like a bird? But it is what it is. So that's why you get them. The reason why we have these is because it's purely based on the mechanics of the throat, the mouth, the anatomy. That's why.
Alhamdulillah, Sheikhna. Yeah, I get it. Jazakallah khair.
That's right. Any more questions? Okay. Oh, yeah, here we go. So I'm going to get somebody, we'll probably get Brother Saeed to carry on. I'll try to get you to pronounce it correctly and incorrectly, so we can talk about examples of how people say this incorrectly. So we'll start with page 94, the most prominent mistakes when pronouncing the letters of the alphabet.
Sure. The most prominent mistakes when pronouncing the letters of the alphabet. Number one, not opening the mouth as required when pronouncing it, as in Musa, like we have to open a mouth, Musa. Number two,
Yes.
mixing its sound with the hint of the sound of aliyah so that it becomes like a tilde alif, as in Maliki. Number three, mixing its sounds with.
So just quickly going back to the example of Musa, if you say Musa with a closed mouth, it'll sound like a saw. And we said saw has itbaq. Musa, you know, saw, you're just saying it. You need to open it out to release it. That's what we mean. Sorry, next word you said was Maliki. After Maliki, sorry. Oh, you there, bro?
Yeah. Number two, mixing its sounds with a hint of the sound of aliyah so that it becomes like a tilde alif, as in Maliki.
So do you guys get what he means about point number two? Can somebody give me an example of an incorrect pronunciation with a yet?
Maliki?
Yeah, Maliki, maybe.
Yeah, it's like you got Maliki Yawmiddin. Sometimes you got Maliki Yawmiddin. If you drag it out a bit longer with the kasra, it can sound like a yet. So what you're doing is you're adding a third of a yet in there. It's hidden. You'd ask him, what are you doing? It's like, oh, I'm doing a kasra. I was like, no, but the kasra is too long. So it can happen when you drag out the letter too long. Even if it's a kasra, it's a correct kasra, but if you drag it out too long, it sounds like a ya. So it's supposed to be maliki or maliki. But if you say maliki, that's when it actually becomes wrong. You see what I mean?
Yes, Jazakallah khair.
Ajmain. Number three.
Number three.
You can read it correctly, and I'll find the incorrect example.
Sure. Number three, mixing its sounds with a hint of the sound of al-waw, as in khalidina, fatala.
Oh, okay, I get it. So here, khalidina fatala. If you say khalidina, D, not D, or instead of saying fatala, you're saying fatala. Do you see what I mean? You're adding a little waw, so it's not a full fatha. You see what I mean? Anybody has any issues with that?
That's clear.
Okay, so next one.
Making it heavy where it should be light, as in an-nahara, an-nara, al-batilu.
Yeah, so one way of saying it incorrectly, don't copy me, I'm saying it incorrectly. Just letting you know, students might say an-nahar is like, well, we know, as we talked about the safat of the ha, it's not ha, it's ha, hu, he. So النهار. It's not. People say النهار. That's incorrect. النار. It's النار. And this is a common one with Arabs as well. I'm looking at you guys. They're either saying al-batil, you say al-batil, ba. So, it's bahbubi. You can't say ba. So it's, as you can see, these are mistakes I'm giving you right now. They're purely non-Arab mistakes. So you can imagine what it's like for non-Arabs as well, So we're just highlighting these things out because your job is not to learn Tajweed for the sake of it being an art and looking pretty and everything. But at the end of the day, as we know in the Quran, it says that تُبَيِّنُنَّهُ لِلنَّاسِ وَلَا تَكْتُمُونَهُ. You will show it to the people and you will not hide it. Allah here says, basically, we've taken a mithaq, a covenant, a heavy responsibility. You will show it to the people, you won't hide it. So part of it is learning. And part of learning is not only will you learn to say it correctly, you'll help teach people and you help them say it correctly as well. And that's what we're practicing right now, mashallah, because now we've covered the sifat. So yeah, these mistakes I'm giving you, they're purely Arab mistakes as well. People say an-nahar, say an-nahar, not an-nar, an-nar, al-batil, not al-batil. So yeah, we'll carry on, inshallah. Number 5.
Number 5, making it light, whether it should be heavy, as in khalidina, ghaiba.
Yep, so that's pretty straightforward. Number 6.
Number 6, mixing its sounds with the sound of ghunna, as in ar-rahmanu, an-nasu, an-nasi.
Okay, so here ghunna, we'll cover this later, but you're adding a nasal sound to it. We'll explain what ghunna is for the sake of simplicity. We'll cover it in the next page. Sorry, in the next lessons, inshallah. Yeah, next ones.
Mistakes made when pronouncing the lengthening vowel. Number 1, not circling the lips as required when pronouncing it, as in ta'maluna.
Yeah, so here sometimes people they'll be like, rather than saying ta'malun, they'll say ta'malun. You guys see where I'm coming from? Ta'malun, lu, lu. So obviously we don't round it off. You tend to have something that's like a wow, but it's not actually a wow. Yeah, next one.
Number 2, exaggeration in pressing the lips when pronouncing it, as in yakuluna.
Yes, so yaquluna, you want to say lu, because at the end of the day we said from Lin Umar. No, that's different. I made a mistake here. Basically, you don't want to over exaggerate it. So here, waw is a light letter. You don't want to say it as if it's got a shadda on. Yeah, just remember that. Next one.
Number 3, mixing its sounds with a hint of the sound of the alif, as in kanu.
Mixing the sound with the hint and of the alif. Sorry, I need to read the Arabic so I remember this point. شيء من صوت الألف نحو. خلط صوتها بشيء من صوت الألف نحو. To be honest, I'm finding it hard to explain this one. خلط صوتها بشيء من صوت الألف. كانوا. I can't think of a bad pronunciation. Sometimes it's hard to actually think of a bad one, to be honest.
Yes,
Well, I advise people. Yeah, I mean, if somebody can chip in an example, I'm more than happy to take your suggestions. How you could read this incorrectly.
I mean, I could probably read it incorrectly, Sheikh, like most things, but maybe someone could say kanua, they kanua, they don't release the lips properly at the end, maybe. Kanua.
You're probably right, because at the end of the day, that sounds like you are actually mixing it with a, with the alif, when it's supposed to be an extension of kanu. But here for kanua, yeah, you're probably right. That could be it. Allahu A'lam. So, well, yeah, I have to admit defeat on this one. So, yeah, that could be one way of saying it. So we'll carry on to the next one, inshallah.
Number 4, mixing its sounds with a hint of the sound of the ya, as in yuqinun.
Yuqinun. Oh yeah, this is probably more of a Turkish thing. Sometimes you hear this yuqinun. So here it's like, I'm breaking the waw more than necessary. So just as a general guide for everybody, this page the shortcut that I'm going to teach you for today to remember this page is if you ever have a doubt about a letter, like say the ha in nahar, when the how, or غائبة, خالدين. Look at the letter that you're trying to troubleshoot, like the ha, and then break it down. Like say you might be suspecting reading incorrectly. Like say an-nahar. I want to see if I'm saying the ha correctly. I'll isolate it. That's the number one rule. And say ha, hu, he. Say it 3 times. Ha, hu, he. Ha, hu, he. And then say it again. An-nahar. If you go, oh, that makes sense. Because what happened, if they sound different, it means you're pronouncing it incorrectly. And this is probably because the letter that you're pronouncing in an-nahar, the letters next to it are influencing it. So that's why I tell people, go back 3 steps or 2 steps, isolate it, repeat it in fatha, dhamma, kasra form, and say it straight away and see if it matches. If it's exactly the same, you're probably saying it correctly. So that's a shortcut for this page. Hoping it's helped out. Okay, we'll carry on, inshallah.
Number 5. Mixing its sounds with a hint of sound of hunna, as in al-zalimuna.
Oh, okay. I'll skip the hunna part. I'll see. We'll cover this later. Al-zalimun. You see, al-zalimun. You don't say zalimun with the. You want to say it with a nasal sound. You want to say moon, moon. There's a difference. It should be moon, not moon. So that's an example. Next one, inshallah.
Mistakes made when pronouncing the lengthening ya. Number 1, mixing its sounds with a hint of sound of alif, because the middle of the tongue is not raised as required when pronouncing it, as in nasta'inu.
Sorry. المفروض النطق بها نحن نستعين. خطأ بشيء من صوت الألف. علم راق. Sorry, I'm just trying to keep up. Mixing it sound, the hint sound better. Oh, I'm guessing it's nasta'in. It's supposed to be nasta'in. Allahu a'lam. That could be one way. So mixing the sound of the hint of the sound of the alif. Yeah, that's the one. So rather saying nasta'in, you say nasta'in. It becomes like ayah, for example. Allahu a'lam. Next one.
Okay, and number 2, exaggeration in pressing on the middle of tongue when pronouncing it, as in al-mustaqim.
Yeah. So again, it's a gentle letter. As we said, there is the reason why we're saying this. People, it might look obvious to some people, but here, that's what happens when you're over exaggerating. Yeah, is a soft letter. Yeah. It's not like ajid qatan bakat. Ajid qatan bakat are the strong letters. So if you remember your sifat, you'll be able to troubleshoot this. You don't say mustaqim and be hard on it. Mustaqim and just let it out. There's a difference between letting out something and relaxing it, then forcing something out. You don't want to be forcing your yeah out. Next one, inshallah.
Number 3, mixing its sounds with a hint of the sound of hunna, as in al-alamin.
Yeah, same thing. You don't want to add nasal sounds. We'll cover this later. You want to say alamin. You want to say alamin. It's a huge difference. You can hear it. Inshallah. Before we start. Oh, subhanallah. Okay, well, it'll be a good point to stop here. Because, mashallah, the next section, here basically, he's talking about the common mistakes that happen when you're pronouncing the alphabets in Tajweed. The next one, mashallah, from page 96 onwards, it covers examples from every single letter. So next week, I want you to prepare yourself for a really practical session. Because we're going to go through mistakes that happen with every single alphabet, inshallah. Well, at least most of them. Just to test everybody's understanding. So best piece of advice, if you want to revise the sifat, by all means do so. So it's that's going to be what we'll cover for next week. So this is actually a good place to stop, inshallah. So just mark it in your books. Inshallah, the next session is going to be all practical. Before I ask any more questions of you, just write down the questions. I'm looking at the messages here. Bismillah. Is it the last letter, gunna? Oh, so here, is it at the last letter غنة while doing waqf at noon in nasta'in? Here, technically this, yeah. So here the example here, this mentioned in the comments is could the غنة be nasta'in? This one, I wouldn't refer to it strictly as a غنة, but sometimes you hear people, the غنة will come in the mad side. So they nasta'in, like this. So it comes from between the ayn and the noon. If people say nasta'in, I wouldn't really refer to this as much as a ghunna, although it is a nasal sound. But I'll probably, my personal opinion, trying to add a shadda where it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be nasta'in. But if you're adding a shadda to it, people say nasta'in, but that's incorrect because you've changed the shadda. Like whether you call it a ghunna or a shadda is a matter of perspective. But I've just gave you these two ways of incorrectly pronouncing it. At the end of the day, I'm not too stressed out about whether it's called a ghunna or a shadda. These are incorrect ways. So you can't say it as nasta'in with a nasal sound or nasta'in with the extension of the noon. So I hope that's, jazakallah khair, hopefully that's answered it. First, other question. Why the alphabets have similarly different sifa at the same time and how we can learn to apply all sifa on a letter at the same time? That was the question. Well, as you can see, oh yeah, we covered alif and kan. So here basically the question is, they've got all these sifat. How can we say all these sifat at the same time? If you look at the table, what you'll notice is that mashallah, this is going to make sense to you when you do sound engineering, because you have your base note, like let's just say 50 hertz or whatever, 50 hertz, 20 hertz, 100, 6 kilohertz. So you have the base frequency, and it's like a sine wave, cos wave, whatever it is. And then you have something called your harmonics. What harmonics means is the layers of sound you add to the base frequency in order for that to make the sound that you hear. It could be music, could be my sound. That's why you can hear my sound differently. I might have a base frequency or tone, and my harmonics are what adds layers to it. That's how you are able to, mashallah, both pronounce and hear different sounds at once. It's mashallah, it's something innate in hearing, sound engineering. It is possible for something to have more than one capability in pronouncing it. What you're trying to do, mashallah, is, for example, I'll give you an example. Like say, ka, kaifa. When you look at ka in a completely different language, it's the closest letter you can find to it in English is K. So technically speaking, although it's a different language, the sifa is still there. So it is possible for something to have more than one sifa, but the original characteristic, the base frequency, the 10 hertz I talked about, will always be the same, the fundamental one, ka. So whether you're doing sound engineering, signal processing, or whatever it is, this is your base frequency. It doesn't change. You can add harmonics and you can go, oh yeah, this ka, this is how Egyptians say ka, for example. This is how English people say ka. This is how Americans say ka. That's the harmonics. Mashallah, this shows you the level of detail, mashallah. We can hear part frequencies when we're doing tajweed. So I hope that answers these questions. Any more questions, inshallah, so far from anybody?
جزاك الله خير for the session.
تقبل الله.
Minkum, jazakallah khair. I'll just wait for the train to pass through, but yeah. Anyone has any more questions about sifat? Anything in tajweed in general, what we've covered, what we'd like to cover? Everybody's all good?
Yeah,
Yeah,
alhamdulillah.
the practical lessons started, so now before looks like dry, now much better, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, inshallah. Next session is going to be all about practical, inshallah. So we're going to get ready. We'll do every single letter. Just be prepared because we're going to pass it around, inshallah. So hopefully it's all good. So if you guys don't have any questions, just leave them for the group chat. And inshallah, I'll see you guys then. But alhamdulillah, it's going to be all practical, hopefully, from now on, with maybe a bit more theory, but we'll see how we go. But yeah, jazakallah khair, guys. It's been really good, inshallah. Hopefully, we're nearly halfway, so keep up the good work.
Ustad, I have a question regarding the sessions we will be having in during Ramadan. So, is there any time have we decided? Because there will be a Taraweeh, so we will be busy in the evening. So, is there any specific time we will be doing the session?
All good. So in terms of timing, let me just check. For those in New Zealand, I am aware of like the times. We've got two options. Either we can do the class a bit earlier so that everybody has time to prepare for iftar. It sounds a bit crazy because one of the brothers asked me, "Oh, so what are the plans for Ramadan?" And then obviously it's like I started laughing because I am aware of the iftar thing. I don't want to be the last thing you wanted to go is like, "Oh yeah, my Tajweed teacher said because of the month of Ramadan and the month of the Quran, we're not having Quran lessons." I don't want to sound like a hypocrite, but at the same time, I am aware that people need to prepare food. So it's we have to kind of balance the worldly things with whatever. Classes a bit earlier if need be, but only for 4. We might even finish in Ramadan. Allahu A'lam, who knows? But yeah, if we have to make them early, I guess this is it. So I have no provisions. Do mention it to Brother Sahal. I'll stay in touch with him. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's I mean, I'm not gonna go crazy on you guys either. I'm not gonna increase the frequency of the Quran classes in Ramadan. It's just if we can at least keep up the pace, I'll be alright. Okay, there's a reason why I insist on doing it in Ramadan. I'm a hypocrite, so I have to put my hands up first. But the kind of teaches is that if we can't maintain at least 20 minutes of Quran in Ramadan, even Tajweed related, then God help us outside of Ramadan. So it's I'm of the belief that we should at least have something. In saying that, you'll find me active inside and outside of Ramadan. I do answer questions as well. So it's do mention it to management. I can start a bit earlier if it helps out. So it doesn't clash with your, you could say, iftar preparation and whatnot. And worst case scenario for those that can't make it, I know you guys are studying. I've already seen in the chat, some people have universities, some people have whatever. We can always have the group chat or whatever to catch up on the YouTube videos. So yeah, my best advice, where I'm based right now in New Zealand, Maghrib is in an hour's time. If it's earlier in your place and you feel that Maghrib is going, or you need at least to have half an hour breather before iftar, then do look up the timetables in your country and just mention it's Brother Asra. We'll see what we can do. So yeah, hopefully that's it.
Jazakumullah.
Ajmain. But yeah, I know this was mentioned earlier, but I'd feel weird cancelling a Quran program for Ramadan. It's just like, it's a bit weird. Tfaddal Sheikh, sorry.
I'm just, you have, is anybody from outside of New Zealand? Is that from Australia or?
I think most of us are from New Zealand.
Yeah,
So even Ustad, what we can do, of course, we will not be missing any class during Ramadan. It's a blessing to have the classes. So what we can do, we can shorten the session time. Like if we're starting like 6:30 till 8 o'clock, like 1 hour and 30 minutes. So we can reduce the time to 1 hour or less than that time, So at least we can continue something, you know.
Yeah, that could be an option. I'm open to that as well. So, best thing to do, I guess, I don't know. You guys correct me if I'm wrong. It's your class at the end of the day. I'm doing this for you guys. Maybe just put it to a vote. See if the time suits. Yeah, if the time suits you guys, say yeah, we'll stick with it, make it shorter. If you guys are like, oh, we want to keep it the same, maybe a bit earlier, I'm willing to accommodate.
Yeah, I think after our brother Star can create a poll on WhatsApp group, then we can decide there. Inshallah.
Ustad, is it possible to have a session on Saturday or Sunday sometime, like in the middle of the day? So I think it will be very easy if you can manage it. You know, it's all depends on you, your availability.
Inshallah, I can try to do it. I mean, for me, it's because I already have the Quran classes on the weekends. On Sunday, it might be a bit of a clash.
So we can make it on Saturday rather to have a class on Friday evening. So it might clash with the iftar. So what we can do, we can do it anytime on Saturday, if possible for you.
Inshallah, I'll stay in touch in the WhatsApp group. I might have another trip organized. That's why. So I'll probably try not to bite too much. But yeah, definitely, it's that's an option.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, but for the time being, we'll sort out the Ramadan thing first, and then hopefully, inshallah, they'll be all good. We'll take it down from there.
Inshallah. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah khair, folks. If you have any questions, you know what to do. Do the usual, inshallah. And we'll definitely be in touch. I really appreciate it.
Jazakallah khairan.
Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Take care, inshallah. سبحان الله وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك. السلام عليكم ورحمه الله.
وعليكم السلام ورحمه الله.
وعليكم السلام.
Assalamu alaikum.